Hello, my name is Seyed from EDD Academy, and today I will be doing the SAT Official Test number 10 Math section with no calculator walkthrough. Okay, so problem 1. What value of z follows the equation above? So the equation we have is 2z plus 1 is equal to z. This is a fairly simple linear equation. So the first thing we want to do is subtract z from both sides. I like to do that first because moving the variables, in my opinion, is the easiest thing to do first, unless you have another constant that you can easily cancel out. So let's subtract z. So 2z minus z is just z plus 1 is equal to 0. So from here, we just subtract 1 and get z is equal to -1. Now, usually you want to just plug this in and like select b and hope you did the process correctly. However, we can check this because this is just a walkthrough. So 2 times -1 plus 1 should be equal to -1. We see that -2 plus 1 is equal to -1, which is true. -2 plus 1 is -1, and we see that our solution checks out, and there we go. So the answer is B, -1. Okay, so a television with the price of $300, this is important information, so let's write it down. $300 is to be purchased with an initial payment of $60, okay? $60, let's write that down, okay? And weekly payments, weekly, note that, okay, of $30, okay? So, which of the following equations can be used to find the number of weekly payments, W, required to complete the purchase, assuming there are no taxes or fees? Okay, so let's start by looking at what we know. We know that initially, you pay $60, right? That's right here, okay? So let's start out by writing this. $60, it's positive, right? So we already know that it can't be minus 60 because you don't lose $60, right? And it can't be minus 30 because, well, it's $60. All right, and already we can probably see that it's this one right here because this one doesn't even have a 60 in it. However, we'll just keep going for the sake of seeing the problem through. And every week we add $30 to it, right? So $30 times W, the number of week it is. So after 1 week, you will have to pay another $30 on top of the $60 you've already paid. And we want to find a number of weeks it'll take until you pay off that whole $300. So we just have to set this equal to 300, and this is our equation. As we can see, this matches C exactly. So the table above shows shipping charges for an online retailer that sells sporting goods. There is a linear relationship, important, linear relationship between the shipping charge and the weight of the merchandise. Which function can be used to determine the total shipping charge f of x in dollars for an order with a merchandise weight of x pounds? So just before we get started, I'm just going to relabel f of x as y, just because f of x is a little bit longer to write. Okay, so the first thing we like to do with any linear equation is just find out the slope, right? Or in this case, the rate. So let's just take any two values since we know that it's linear, right? And subtract them, all right? So m and y is equal to mx plus b. So write that out, y is equal to mx plus b. So m is always equal to the difference between y1, y0 over x1 minus x0. So we can use that here. 21.89 minus 16.94. Okay, all right. And let's do the subtraction, right? We have 5 here. We make this into 18. Take the 1 away from there. 9. Take 1 away from there. Make that 10. 4. And that's just 0. So 495. And over here, we can easily tell the difference between these two is simply 5. So we get 4.95 over 5 is equal to, well, let's just approximate 1, right? So since it's very close to 1, we can already just knock out C and D, right? Okay. And there also has to be some sort of constant added onto the end, because if we only had y is equal to approximately 1, so basically x, right? Then we would have, after 5, it would only be 5, right? However, we know that's wrong, right? Because when you plug in x is equal to 5, right, the output is 16.94, right? Which is not the same as 5. So we can already tell that it must be B, because this has no constant added onto the end. The reason why I didn't go through the exact process of finding out the constant is that on a test, you want to find ways to just shave off time, and that's really easy to do with like a multiple choice situation, because you can just find out which answers aren't right. For example, we didn't even have to calculate this, we just knew that it was very close to 1, and it's actually 0.99. So we already know these two are wrong, and then we can tell that it has to have some kind of value added onto the end, which would be 11.99, and that already tells us that must be B. All right, so always look for ways that you can save time by like not entirely completing the problem, but be warned that by taking shortcuts like that, you can actually risk getting the wrong answer. So only do it when you're confident that you're going to get the right answer, like we did here. So the line in the xy plane above represents the relationship between the height, h of x, in feet, and the base diameter, x, in feet, for cylindrical Doric columns in ancient Greek architecture. How much greater is the height of a Doric column that has a base diameter of 5 feet than the height of a Doric column that has a base diameter of 2 feet? Okay, so they give us the two values. We have 2 feet versus 5 feet, if I'm not mistaken. So we have to find the difference between the heights that are associated with this, right? So instead, let's just view this as a more simple linear equation problem. So these are the inputs, these are the x's, right? And we're looking for the difference between their y's, right? So let's call this x1, let's call this x0. Actually, let's call this x0 and call this x1, right? So we want to find the difference between y1 minus y0. This is really easy to do. So we see that this is, when the diameter is 2 feet. So that corresponds to the height of 14 feet. And when the diameter is 5 feet, that corresponds with a height of 35 feet. So we just subtract 35 minus 14 is 21. You can see that's C, 21 feet. If x is greater than 0, which of the following is equivalent to the given expression? So square root of 9x squared is equal to which of these, right? So let's first do the same, I guess a longer way, but it's more clear in explanation. So we have the classic law for square roots. Square root of AB is equal to square root of A times the square root of B. So in this case, that would be the square root of 9 times the square root of x squared is the same as this. This is really easy to evaluate. We know that this is 3 and that this is x, which give us 3x. But we could instead just also recognize that 9x squared is equal to 3x to the power of 2. And then we'd be able to more directly just cancel it out. However, this is also just a nice situation to just practice those square root laws, and I guess brush up on some basic rules for these types of things. Okay, so what are all the values of x that satisfy the equation above? And the equation is x squared minus 1 over x minus 1 is equal to -2. Okay, so You could multiply each side by x minus 1 and solve it like that. However, there's a more neat trick you can do. Instead, realize that x squared minus 1 is a difference of squares, and we know that the difference of squares formula would lead to this expansion for the top. So in the denominator, coincidentally, I think not actually, we have x minus 1. So now we can just easily cancel these two out for a nice clean equation for x plus 1 is equal to minus 2. We then get x is equal to minus 3, which is one of the options here. Now, just to be careful for this problem in a real test, you'd probably trust your gut instinct and just choose 3. You can double check that we're not wrong. So for 0, we can obviously tell that if you plug in 0 here, you would get negative 1 over negative 1, which is not equal to negative 2. For 1, you would get 0 over 0, which is definitely not allowed. And for negative 3, we know that's right. So for negative 1, you plug that in and you would get 1 minus 1, 0, all right, over minus 1, which is minus 2. But it's still 0, so still wrong. But in a real test, you would just quickly mark down the negative 3. So the graph of y is equal to f of x is shown in the xy plane. What is the value of f of 0? This is a rather simple example, but let's just quickly write something. So f of 0 is equal to y at x is equal to 0. So x is equal to 0 at that point, and we just go directly up and we see this is f of 0, or f of 0 is equal to 4. So you just find x is 0 and look at where it intersects the lines. Pretty simple stuff. Let's move on. So in the figure above, point B lies on AD. What is the value of 3x? Okay, so this is a rather interesting problem. What we do here is that we realize that this angle over here is a right angle. Okay, so a line, by the way, AD is a line, as we know by this notation. So a line has an angle measure of 180 degrees. Okay, so therefore, if there is a line by splitting it, and you have a 90-degree angle on one side, it stands to reason that the other side, right over here, so x plus 2x plus 2x must also be equal to 90 degrees, with the x's being slices of the opposing angle. We then group these up. So you got 5x is equal to 90. Okay. We divide 90 by 5, which gives us 18, if I'm not mistaken. Okay. So it then asks us for what is 3x though, okay? So we can just multiply 18 by 3, which would give us 30 plus 24, which is 54. The answer is C, okay? So I was a lot more thorough in explaining this one. However, you wouldn't need to go over the fact that a line has an angle measure of 180 degrees to show that this angle is 90 degrees. If you see that there's a 90-degree line here, and this is a straight line, immediately you should know that this side is 90 degrees, okay? So, also not too hard. So, which of the following is an equation of line curlio in the xy plane above? So this is the line. So this line is given by an equation. That's not a very good representation of it, but it's given by a function, I guess. Y is equal to mx plus b. We'll worry about putting it into the form for these answers later, but let's quickly look at this, okay? So here, it's pretty simple. We have an increment of 2, okay? X increases by 2. Corresponding to that, we have a decrease of 2, minus 2 on the y side. So m is equal to delta y over delta x, change in y over change in x, which is then minus 2 over 2, minus 1. So y is equal to minus x plus b. And b is the y-intercept. That's good for us because we clearly see the y-intercept is right here. So b then equal to -4. So y is equal to minus x minus 4, okay? Now we can just add x to each side and we get x plus y is equal to minus 4, which is option C, right? So, not too difficult. So the graph of y is equal to 2x squared plus 10x plus 12 is shown, this right here. If the graph crosses the y-axis at the point 0k, what is the value of k? So there are two ways to go about this. Let's go about the longer way first, okay? So y at x is equal to 0, which is, given by that, okay, is equal to 2 times 0 squared plus 10 times 0 plus 12. And since this is all multiplied by 0, then just 0 equals 12, okay? So we now know that the y values, this is the x value, this is the y value then, at x is equal to 0 is equal to 12. So the answer is D. Or you could just realize that this is the y-intercept, and the y-intercept for an expanded quadratic like this is just the last term, 12, since all the other terms involve x and would hence turn to 0 once you multiply them by 0. Okay? So, but this is the longer explanation for why that is true.